Hi everyone, my name is Shae Frierson and welcome to my book talk. Today I'm going to be discussing three verse novels, Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds, Burned by Ellen Hopkins, and The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. Now, if you don't know, a verse novel is a book that follows a narrative structure and tells a single story, but the twist comes in the fact that the story is told through a series of poems. So each of these books covers some pretty heavy topics. They discuss issues like violence, family, self expression, faith, love, identity, intimacy. The list just kind of goes on and on. But they're told through the eyes of three very different characters with very different lives. So, my hope today is that hearing about these stories, you'll find something that will resonate with you, or something that you can relate to, or even just something that you find really interesting that you want to know more about. So, let's just launch right into it. So, the first book that I'm going to be discussing is Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. This is the cover. Uh, of the three books, this is probably one of the more emotional ones. It covers a lot of very heavy topics, the bulk of which stem from societal violence, the cycle of violence that a lot of people endure growing up in more ethnic, low income neighborhoods. So, Long Way Down follows Will as he takes an elevator ride that could very well change his life. When the story opens, we learn that Will's brother Sean has just been murdered. He was shot on the street. A lot of people saw it, but no one's talking, which is sort of just the norm. Um, so Will is pretty sure he knows who killed his brother, and because this is what you do in this neighborhood, he feels that he doesn't have a choice. He knows what he has to do, and he believes that he is prepared to do that. So according to the book, the rules are as follows. Um, Number one, crying. Don't, no matter what. Number two, snitching. Don't, no matter what. Number three, revenge. If someone you love gets killed, find the person who killed them and kill them. The invention of the rules ain't come from my brother, his friends, my dad, my uncle, the guys outside, the hustlers and shooters, and definitely not from me. Another thing about the rules, they weren't meant to be broken. They were meant for the broken to follow. So as Will makes his way down to go and try to find his brother's killer, he's greeted on each floor by a different rider, and each of these riders comes with a new story that forces Will to consider the consequences of what he's planning to do. So these are usually people from his past, people that he knows, and people who have been through what he's been through. So it really forces him to look beyond his feelings and his grief and his emotions and really consider what he's about to do and whether or not he wants to continue this cycle of violence or make a choice for himself and break it. Um, so this one may be a little bit less relatable for a lot of teens, but for some it might be. As I said, it's very emotional. It really gets deep into his brain and his past, and it really just discusses that cycle of violence and whether or not you should make your own choices and break them. So that's that first book. The next book that I'll be discussing is Burned by Ellen Hopkins. So this takes a pretty deep turn from the previous book. This story follows Patton, the oldest of a family of Mormon girls, who, after being caught by her parents rebelling against their very strict, no-nonsense rules, gets sent off to the farm of her estranged aunt for the summer. But what Patton thought would be a terrible punishment that she'd be working all day doing manual labor actually ends up being a pretty freeing experience for her. Like most teenagers, Patton feels lost. She's struggling to find her own identity and her own belief system despite the very stringent upbringing she's used to. While on her aunt's farm, she discovers love, self expression, and a freedom to be herself that she's never experienced at home. Um, but as she'll learn, the past isn't something that's so easily shaken. Uh, as the story progresses, Patton is forced to reconcile her personal faith and her newfound freedom with the faith of her family. She's forced to reconcile her love for her family with the love and comfort that she's discovered with her aunt and the new friends that she's discovered on this farm. And the parts of her identity that she had at home with the ones that she's gained on this farm. So Patton is a very relatable story. She's trying to find herself outside of the confines of her family and her society and her religion. It's a very good story. It gets very emotional and sad, but it's a wonderful story. There is a kind of a cliffhanger at the end, which will make you want to pick up the sequel. Um, but yeah, if it's something that you struggle with, if you're somebody who comes from a very religious background, this story could be a great read for you. Last but not least, we have The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. Um, so this story follows Xiomara. She is a first generation Dominican teenager growing up in a Harlem neighborhood with very, very strict Catholic parents. So, for most of her life, Xiomara stifles a pretty quiet rage, though she doesn't talk a lot because of her very early development and the fact that her brother is a very quiet, smart, nerdy kid. She learns that using her fist does a lot more than using her words very early on in life. But what she doesn't say out loud, she does express in her poetry. Um, these are poems that she writes for herself. She doesn't ever expect anyone to actually hear them, but it's a lifeline for her. That is until a teacher at school exposes her to slam poetry, a kind of poetry that you perform in front of people, and invites her to the school's poetry club. So this puts Zoe in a particularly difficult decision because obviously immediately she wants to be in this club. But because of the expectations of her parents, because of her religion, it's a choice she has to make. So she has to choose between upholding what her mother and her father want for her. And finding her own identity through spoken word. So along the way, she discovers new friendships, faith, love, and her own voice in a way that she never really could have imagined. So each of these stories features characters discovering their own identities and their ability to make personal life decisions despite the pressures of parents and society and their community and the expectations of everyone else around them. And despite some of the more dramatic circumstances that each of these characters deals with, I think the struggle is something that most people, particularly teenagers who are going through a lot of changes when it comes to personal responsibilities and the expectations of others, I think it's something that people could really relate to. Beyond that, the stories are very well written. They're simple to read because it is poetry, but they allow you to use your own imagination and to kind of fill in some of the blanks. So I do hope that you liked what you heard, and I hope you get a chance to check them out. Thank you very much.